Announced this screening of The Night Porter, we received several emails from people who objected to our choice of film. And this film is sometimes classified as a, quote, Nazi-sploitation film. And so, how could we show this film at a time of rising right-wing politics and anti-Semitism? And isn't it incredibly unhelpful to be publicizing a movie built around a tormented relationship between a Nazi concentration camp guard and a Jewish prisoner? But we believe it's exactly the right time to show this movie. We're in a very particular moment of history. The kind of post-war order, which is an organization of time and events based on the idea, when we say post-war order, we mean it's implicit in it, the idea of the long and deep legacy of the war. And I really believe that right now that post-war order is unraveling as we speak, courtesy of the trend to illiberal politics and the unleashing of new levels of racism. And with it dies the notion that what happened during World War II was so monumentally awful and evil that to leave it behind through forgetting or absorption into the flow of history would imperil our very humanity. And intellectuals such as Adorno, Paul Celan, and Primo Levi reflected that the Holocaust defied and defiled language, culture, reason, and reality. There is no why here, wrote Levi in Survival in Auschwitz. And yet, here we are, seeing right-wing populist parties gain strength in all the old areas, including Austria, birthplace of Hitler and setting for this film. A 2013 poll that was occasioned by the 75th anniversary of the Anschluss, which was the Nazi drive into Austria, found that 42% of Austrians agreed that life was, quote, not all bad under the Nazis, and 39% thought that anti-Semitism was still there under the surface. Now it's coming out strong there and elsewhere in the world. And Holocaust Remembrance Day, which was not too long ago, in this climate, is a thorn in the side of those who want to move on. In Germany, many young people are sick of being judged for those years. They're embracing parties like the main party, Alternative for Germany Party, that's its name, which lets them feel good about being German again. It's inconvenient to remember that the use of racism as a political tool led eventually to mass deportations and then, in some cases, to killing sites. To make racism usable for today, it's best to remove the Jews from the equation. So Holocaust Remembrance Day is increasingly ignored by the new right-wing, they're not so new, the right-wing states and parties, or statements are issued by these groups and nations that fail to mention the Jews. And this was the case of the statement issued by our own Trump administration. I don't know how many of you know, they issued a statement on Holocaust Remembrance Day, and they left out the Jews. Can I say? So in this climate, we need the courageous and clear-eyed vision of Liliana Cavani more than ever. Where others probed cautiously, Cavani drilled, uncaring about social propriety and scornful of the conformisms of ideology. Like other Italian directors of the 1970s, and the film is from 1974, so we have, contemporaries are Bertolucci and Wertmüller, a lot of very strong political filmmaking. So she revealed the double standards and contradictions of the practice of politics. And this includes gender politics. And many people did not like her and did not like her films because of this. And although she made a pioneering documentary that Kim mentioned called Women of the Resistance, and it was made in the 1960s, so it's interesting. She made this documentary for TV on the Third Reich, and then she made a long documentary on Women of the Resistance. And yet, many women disliked the way she skewered and her female characters and thought that she was disloyal to feminism for the way that she presented female characters. And I actually remember some years ago, up on this stage, we showed the documentary Win of the Resistance, and I was seated on the stage commenting on it along with the film scholar Angela Dalle Vacche, and an individual in the audience who had been in the resistance didn't like at all what was being said and started to charge the stage waving his cane. So it's one of the more memorable Casa events for me, and symptomatic of the kind of emotions that Cavani's films can raise in people, because she takes on these orthodoxies and she just sweeps them away and probes in a different direction that's not comfortable for some people. So female desire charges up and charges through her movies with unpredictable and sometimes self-destructive results. So in the highlight of Italian feminism, they didn't take well to this, some of her contemporaries. Exploring the complicated links amongst gender, sexuality, and power, she reminds us that our surface view of power relations and hierarchies can be deceptive. So one of the reasons the film is, kind of notorious is for its sadomasochistic, tinged sex scenes. And they definitely play into the syndrome of, quote, fascinating fascism, as described by Susan Sontag first, and later by scholars such as Chris Ravetto and our own David Forgach, who's the chair of our Department of Italian Studies here. The Night Porter, however, is also important today as a film about memory and testimony. And it's about how silence, as much as speech, is key to normalizing regimes of violence. The Holocaust happened in part because a great many people decided to forget that they used to consider certain actions and situations as unacceptable. And they tried their hardest to remember to forget after the war as well. By setting her film in 1957, Cavani shows the burden of those willed forgettings and rationalizations grew heavier, not lighter, as time passed. So tormented are the former Nazi guards in the story that they seek to kill off those who might testify against them. So they're really prisoners. They were guards, but they're prisoners of their past many years later. So as Kim said too, some people find this movie hard to watch. And in fact, the tortured human relations at the heart of it are meant to be uncomfortable. It's meant to be an uncomfortable and unsettling spectacle. Now, speaking of The Night Porter with Melinda Camber Porter in the 70s, Cavani argued that being aware of the gray areas between love and hate, between prisoner and captor, is, quote, necessary for progress in public and private life, end quote. Now, her film ends in utter ruin, as did the Nazi war machine that inspired it. And for this reason, too, it's a cautionary tale. It certainly does not have a happy ending. So I think that we must know our temptations. The way that this film resonates with me, besides the normalization of violence, the weight of keeping secrets and conformism and not speaking, is to know our temptations and our capacity to be seduced and fascinated by power in order to be aware and on guard when these things present themselves to us again. And you may feel they're presenting themselves now. So in that spirit, and without saying anything more about the film to leave it all a surprise, I will turn it over to the screening. Thank you.